Poor girl had only $7 for a blind date. Single dad CEO sat at the next table with his 6-year-old daughter. Before we dive in, this video is traveling across time zones right now. Share what season you're experiencing where you live. The fluorescent lights of Mel's diner buzzed overhead as Emma Parker clutched her small purse, feeling the weight of 7 crumpled dollar bills inside. At 23, she had learned to stretch every penny, but tonight felt different. Tonight was supposed to be her chance. "Table for one?" the hostess asked, eyeing Emma's thrift store dress with barely concealed judgment. "Actually, I'm meeting someone," Emma replied, scanning the half-empty restaurant. Her blind date, arranged by her co-worker Jessica, was already 10 minutes late. The butterflies in her stomach had transformed into a knot of anxiety. She spotted him immediately, a tall man in an expensive suit, checking his phone impatiently near the corner booth. But he wasn't alone. A little girl with golden curls sat across from him, carefully arranging crayons on the red vinyl table. "That must be David Morrison," Emma whispered to herself, recognizing the man from Jessica's description. But Jessica hadn't mentioned anything about a child. The hostess led Emma to a table directly adjacent to theirs, so close she could hear the little girl's animated chatter. "Daddy, why do grown-ups always look so sad when they eat alone?" the 6-year-old asked, her bright blue eyes studying Emma with curious intensity. David Morrison, 32 years old and CEO of Morrison Industries, looked up from his phone. His company had just closed a $50 million deal, yet his daughter Sophie's observations always managed to put life in perspective. "Not everyone has someone to eat with, sweetheart," he replied gently, following her gaze to the young woman at the next table. Emma pretended to study her menu, but the prices made her stomach drop. Even the cheapest item cost more than half her remaining money. She checked her phone again, now 15 minutes late. "Daddy, she has sad eyes but a kind smile," Sophie continued in that stage whisper only children possess, "like Mommy used to have." David's expression darkened slightly at the mention of his late wife, but he managed a smile for his daughter. "Finish your chicken nuggets, princess." Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. "Sorry, can't make it. Emergency at work. Rain check." Her heart sank. No rain check was coming. She could read between the lines. Another disappointment in a string of many. She stared at the message, feeling tears threaten to spill. "Excuse me, miss." Sophie's small voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma looked up to find the little girl standing beside her table, holding a crayon drawing. "I made this for you," Sophie said, placing the paper on Emma's table, "because you look like you need a friend." The drawing showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One had long brown hair like Emma's, and the other had short blonde hair like Sophie's. "Sophie, come back here right now," David called, standing up with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry," he said to Emma. "She's very social." Emma smiled through her tears. "It's beautiful, Sophie, thank you." "See, Daddy? I told you she had a kind smile." Sophie beamed. David studied Emma more carefully now, noticing the tears she was trying to hide and the way she clutched her phone. Something in her expression reminded him of his own struggles, though he couldn't quite place why. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Emma nodded quickly, embarrassed. "Just waiting for someone who apparently isn't coming." "That's terrible," Sophie declared, with the righteous indignation only a 6-year-old could muster. "People should keep their promises." "Sophie's right," David agreed. Would you like to join us? I hate eating alone too, and Sophie clearly has more wisdom than both of us combined." Emma hesitated. She didn't belong in their world of expensive clothes and casual confidence, but something in David's eyes seemed genuine, and Sophie was already pulling out the chair next to her. "I can't afford much," Emma admitted quietly. "My treat," David said without hesitation. "Consider it payment for being kind to my daughter." As Emma moved to their table, she noticed how Sophie's eyes seemed to study her with an intensity unusual for a child. It was as if the little girl could see something others couldn't. "What's your name?" Sophie asked as Emma sat down. Emma Parker." Sophie's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something almost like recognition crossing her features. Parker, she repeated thoughtfully. That's a nice name. David flagged down the waitress. Order anything you want, he told Emma. As they talked over dinner, Emma learned that David was a widower who had built his company from nothing after his wife Sarah's death 2 years ago. Sophie, he explained, was his whole world now. What about you? David asked. What do you do? Emma's cheeks flushed. I work at a call center downtown, and I clean offices at night. 2 jobs to make ends meet. Instead of judgment, she saw respect in David's eyes. That takes real strength, he said quietly. Sophie, who had been coloring quietly, suddenly looked up. Emma, do you have any family? Sophie, that's personal, David warned gently. It's okay, Emma said. I grew up in foster care, no family that I know of. Something passed over Sophie's face, a look of profound sadness mixed with something else Emma couldn't identify. Foster care must have been hard, David said softly. Some homes were better than others, Emma replied diplomatically. I aged out at 18 and have been on my own since then. Sophie reached over and patted Emma's hand. You're not alone anymore. You have us now. The simple gesture broke something loose in Emma's chest. She hadn't realized how starved she was for human kindness until this moment. Sophie has a gift for reading people, David explained, watching his daughter with amazement. She's never been wrong about someone's character. What do you see when you look at me? Emma asked Sophie curiously. Sophie tilted her head, studying Emma with those penetrating blue eyes. I see someone who's been looking for home her whole life. And I see. She paused, frowning slightly. I see something familiar, but I don't know what yet. A chill ran down Emma's spine at the child's words. There was something almost otherworldly about Sophie's perception. She's been like this since she could talk, David said. Sometimes I think she sees things the rest of us miss. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself relaxing for the first time in months. David was surprisingly down to earth despite his wealth, and Sophie was delightful company. When the check came, David paid without even looking at the total. Thank you, Emma said, as they prepared to leave. This was the best evening I've had in a long time. Can Emma come to our house? Sophie asked suddenly. I want to show her my room. Sophie, that's not appropriate, David said gently. We just met Emma. But Emma was touched by the invitation. Maybe another time, Sophie. Promise? The little girl asked seriously. I promise. As they walked to the parking lot, Sophie slipped her small hand into Emma's. Emma, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else? Like part of you is missing? Emma stopped walking, struck by the profound nature of the question. Every day, she whispered. Sophie nodded sagely. I think that feeling is about to go away. David helped Sophie into his Mercedes while Emma waited for the bus. As they drove away, Sophie pressed her face to the window, waving goodbye. Emma waved back, feeling a strange mix of happiness and longing. For a few hours, she had glimpsed what family might feel like, but as the Mercedes disappeared into the night, Emma couldn't shake Sophie's words. How could a 6-year-old see so deeply into her soul? And what did she mean about the missing feeling going away? Standing alone at the bus stop, Emma realized that her life had just taken an unexpected turn. She just didn't know yet how dramatically everything was about to change. 3 days later, Emma was scrubbing floors in the Morrison Industries building when fate intervened again. The night cleaning crew was small, just 5 people covering 40 floors of offices. Emma had drawn the short straw for the executive level, always the most intimidating floor to clean. She was on her hands and knees, carefully cleaning around an expensive Persian rug, when the elevator dinged. Emma glanced at her watch. 11:47 p.m. No one should be here this late. Panic fluttered in her chest as footsteps approached. If security found her, she might lose this job too. Emma quickly gathered her supplies and ducked behind a large potted plant. I know you're here, Emma. She froze. That voice was unmistakable. David Morrison stepped into view, still wearing his business suit, but with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but somehow unsurprised to find her hiding. "How did you know?" Emma asked, emerging from behind the plant with her face burning with embarrassment. "Sophie made me promise to check on you," David said with a slight smile. "She's been asking about you every day since dinner. When I mentioned your jobs, she insisted I find out where you worked." "I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. I didn't know this was your building. I can request a different floor." "David," he corrected gently. "And don't be ridiculous. You have every right to work here." Emma clutched her cleaning supplies, acutely aware of the contrast between them. Here she was in rubber gloves and a stained uniform, while he commanded an empire from these very offices. "Sophie wants to see you again," David continued. "She's been drawing pictures of you all week." "She has. Dozens of them, all showing you, her and me together. She's convinced you're going to be important in our lives." Emma's heart skipped. "David, I appreciate your kindness, but we live in different worlds. You saw that at dinner." "Did I?" David moved closer, and Emma caught a hint of his expensive cologne. "Because what I saw was someone who worked 2 jobs to survive, who treated my daughter with genuine kindness, and who didn't once ask for anything despite clearly needing help." "Your daughter is special," Emma said, deflecting. "There's something almost magical about her." David's expression grew serious. "You noticed that too? The way she looks at people, like she can see inside them, and the things she says." Emma trailed off. "Since Sarah died, Sophie's become incredibly perceptive about people's emotions and intentions. Sometimes it's like she knows things she shouldn't know." Emma thought about Sophie's words at the restaurant, about missing pieces and familiar feelings. Has she ever been wrong about someone? Never. Not once. David leaned against his desk. "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, though her pulse quickened. "Sophie mentioned you grew up in foster care. Do you know anything about your birth parents?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Sophie's been asking me about it all week. She keeps saying you belong with us, and that you're part of our family story. When I try to explain that we just met you, she gets this frustrated look, like I'm missing something obvious." Emma's hands trembled slightly. "I don't know much. I was found as a baby, maybe 2 months old, abandoned at a hospital in Chicago. No note, no identification. The nurses named me Emma because it was the first name that came to mind." "Chicago," David repeated thoughtfully. "What hospital?" "St. Mary's. Why?" David's face went pale. "Emma, I need to show you something." He moved to a framed photograph on his desk, a picture of him, Sophie, and a beautiful blonde woman. "This is Sarah, my late wife." Emma studied the photo. Sarah had the same golden hair as Sophie and kind blue eyes that seemed familiar somehow. "She's beautiful," Emma said softly. "Sarah was adopted too," David said quietly. "She spent years searching for her birth family. Before she died, she made me promise to keep looking." "Looking for what?" "Her younger sister." Sarah had a sister born about 21 years after her. The records showed the baby was born in Chicago and given up for adoption, but the trail went cold. Emma's cleaning supplies clattered to the floor as the implications hit her. "David, you can't be suggesting—" "Sarah was born Sarah Michelle Parker," David said carefully. "She kept her maiden name as her middle name after we married." The room seemed to spin around Emma. "Parker, Sophie has been talking about you non-stop since we met. She keeps saying you feel like family and that Mommy would have loved you. At first I thought it was just a child's imagination, but now—" Emma sank into a nearby chair, her mind reeling. "But that's impossible. What are the odds?" "I've learned not to question Sophie's instincts," David said gently. "Would you be willing to take a DNA test, just to be sure?" Emma stared at the photograph of Sarah, searching for similarities. They both had brown eyes, though Sarah's were lighter. Similar nose, perhaps. But it was more than physical features. There was something in Sarah's expression that Emma recognized in her own mirror. "If this is true," Emma whispered, "then Sophie is." "Your niece," David finished. "And you're the aunt Sarah spent years trying to find." The magnitude of the revelation crashed over Emma like a wave. All her life she had felt disconnected, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit anywhere. Could it be that she had family all along? "There's something else," David said hesitantly. "Sarah left something for her sister if we ever found her. She made me promise to give it to her." He went to his office safe and retrieved a small wooden box. Inside was a delicate silver locket and a letter in elegant handwriting. "She wrote this letter 3 months before she died," David explained. "She had a feeling she might not live to meet her sister in person." Emma's hands shook as she opened the letter. "To my dear sister, if you're reading this, it means David kept his promise to find you. I wish I could be there to meet you myself, but I hope this letter helps you understand how much you've meant to me, even though we've never met. I've thought about you every day since I learned of your existence. I've wondered if you have my stubborn streak, if you love chocolate chip cookies as much as I do, if you dream of places you've never been. I hope life has been kind to you. I hope you've found love and happiness. But if you haven't, please know that you have a family now. David is the best man I've ever known. And Sophie has a way of seeing people's hearts. Trust her instincts about you. The locket belonged to our grandmother. Your grandmother too. I never got to meet her, but the social worker said she wanted her granddaughters to have something to remember her by. Please take care of David and Sophie for me. They're good people who deserve love. And if you're anything like what I imagine my sister to be, you deserve love too. With all my heart, Sarah." Emma was crying before she finished reading. The letter felt like a message from beyond, a sister's love reaching across time and death to welcome her home. "The DNA test will take a few days," David said softly. "But Emma, I already know what it's going to say. Sophie knew the moment she saw you." Emma looked up at him through her tears. "How is that possible?" "I don't understand it either, but Sophie has always been different. Sarah used to say she was an old soul. Sometimes I think she sees connections the rest of us miss." Emma clutched the locket to her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt like she might actually belong somewhere. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home and tell Sophie that her prayers have been answered. She's been asking for family since Sarah died. I think she knew you were coming long before either of us did." As they rode the elevator down together, Emma realized that her life had just changed completely. In the span of a week, she had gone from being utterly alone to potentially having a family. But questions nagged at her. How had Sophie known? What other secrets might this connection reveal? And could she really step into the life of a woman she had never met but apparently shared DNA with? The elevator doors opened to reveal the lobby where Emma had scrubbed floors just an hour ago. Now she was walking out beside the building's owner, heading toward a future she could never have imagined. But as they reached David's car, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie's gifts went deeper than anyone realized, and that this reunion was just the beginning of something much larger than any of them understood. The drive to David's house felt surreal. Emma stared out the window of the Mercedes, watching million-dollar homes drift past like a dream sequence. 3 hours ago, she had been a janitor. Now she might be Sophie's aunt and Sarah's sister. "Sophie's going to be asleep," David said as they pulled into a circular driveway. "But she made me promise to wake her if I found you tonight." And Dylan, the Morrison house was a sprawling colonial with warm lights glowing in several windows. Emma felt overwhelmed by its grandeur, but David seemed to sense her discomfort. "It's just a house," he said gently. "Sarah always said a home is made by the people in it, not the size of the rooms." Inside, the house felt surprisingly cozy despite its size. Family photos covered the mantelpiece, and Sophie's drawings were displayed prominently on the refrigerator. Emma could see Sarah's influence everywhere: fresh flowers, soft lighting, and an overall sense of warmth. "Sophie!" David called softly as they climbed the stairs. "Someone special is here to see you." A small blonde head appeared in a doorway, blue eyes bright with excitement despite the late hour. "Emma!" Sophie exclaimed, running toward them in her unicorn pajamas. "Daddy, you found her!" "How did you know I would?" David asked, scooping his daughter into his arms. "Because you always keep your promises," Sophie said matter-of-factly. Then she looked at Emma with those penetrating eyes. "And because Emma was supposed to come home tonight." "Home," Emma repeated. Sophie wiggled out of David's arms and took Emma's hand. "Come see my room. I have something to show you." Sophie's bedroom was a 6-year-old's paradise, decorated in pink and purple with stuffed animals everywhere. But what caught Emma's attention were the dozens of drawings covering one wall. Every single drawing showed the same thing: a tall man, a little blonde girl, and a woman with long brown hair. In some, they were having picnics. In others, they were reading books together or building snowmen. All showed a happy family of 3. "I've been drawing our family since Mommy died," Sophie explained. "But I could never see the lady's face clearly until I met you." Emma's breath caught. "Sophie, when did you start drawing these?" 2 years ago, right after Mommy went to heaven." Sophie pointed to the oldest drawings. "See, the lady was always fuzzy before, but now I know it was you." David studied the drawings with amazement. "Sophie, you never told me these were prophetic." "What's prophetic?" Sophie asked. "It means seeing the future," Emma explained, still staring at the artwork. "I don't see the future," Sophie said seriously. "I see what's supposed to be. Mommy told me before she died that love finds a way. She said our family wasn't ending. It was just changing shape." Emma knelt down to Sophie's level. "Your mommy was very wise. She still talks to me sometimes," Sophie whispered, "in dreams. She told me to watch for a lady with sad eyes and a kind smile who would need our help. She said this lady would help us too." David and Emma exchanged glances. The child's perceptions were beyond anything either of them had experienced. "Sophie, what else did Mommy tell you?" David asked gently. "She said that love makes families. Not just blood, but sometimes blood and love come together to make something extra special." Sophie looked between Emma and her father. "That's what's happening now." Emma felt tears stinging her eyes. "Sophie, we don't know for sure if I'm your aunt yet. We need to wait for test results." Sophie shook her head firmly. "I already know. Want me to show you?" Before either adult could respond, Sophie went to her closet and pulled out a small photo album. "Mommy gave me this before she died," Sophie explained, opening the album carefully. "She said it had pictures of people I needed to remember." The album contained photos of Sarah as a child, but the last page held something that made Emma gasp. It was a hospital bracelet and a small Polaroid photo of a newborn baby. "Mommy said this was her baby sister," Sophie said simply. "The sister she never got to meet but loved anyway." Emma stared at the photo. The baby's features were indistinct, but there was a small birthmark visible on the infant's left shoulder, the same distinctive strawberry-shaped mark Emma had always been self-conscious about. "May I?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the identical birthmark on her shoulder. Sophie traced it gently with her finger. "Mommy has the same mark," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "That's how I knew for sure." David stared in stunned silence. The evidence was overwhelming, even without DNA confirmation. "Sarah had that birthmark?" Emma asked. "In the exact same place," David confirmed. "It was one of the things that made her feel unique. She always said it looked like a heart. Emma had always thought it looked like a heart too, but she had never mentioned it to anyone." "So you're really my Aunt Emma," Sophie said with satisfaction. "And now our family is complete again." The simple acceptance in the child's voice broke down Emma's last defenses. She gathered Sophie into her arms, finally allowing herself to believe that she might truly belong somewhere. "There's one more thing," Sophie said, pulling back to look at Emma seriously. "Mommy left something special for you, but Daddy doesn't know about it yet." David raised an eyebrow. "Sophie, what are you talking about?" Sophie went to her toy chest and moved several stuffed animals aside, revealing a sealed envelope with Emma's name written in Sarah's handwriting. "Mommy hid this and told me to give it to Aunt Emma when she came home," Sophie explained. She said I would know when the time was right. Emma opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was another letter and a key. "My dearest sister Emma," the letter began, "if Sophie is giving you this, it means you found each other, and she trusts you completely. Sophie has gifts that even I don't fully understand, but I know she sees truth where others see only possibilities. This key opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find documents about our family history, some jewelry that belonged to our grandmother, and enough money to start fresh if you need to. But more importantly, you'll find proof that you were wanted and loved, even when circumstances kept us apart. David doesn't know about this because I wanted it to be between sisters. Use what you find wisely, and remember that family isn't just about DNA. It's about choosing to love each other every day. Sophie will need you in ways I can't foresee. Her gifts make her special, but they also make her vulnerable. Watch over her and help David understand that her perceptions are real, even when they seem impossible. Welcome home, little sister. With infinite love, Sarah." Emma looked up to find David and Sophie watching her expectantly. "She knew," Emma whispered. "Somehow Sarah knew I would find you." "Mommy knows lots of things," Sophie said casually. "She said you would be scared at first, but that love would help you be brave." As if on cue, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from the testing lab. "Expedited results available. Strong familial match confirmed. Please call for details." Emma showed the message to David, who smiled with tears in his eyes. "I guess it's official," he said. "Welcome to the family, Emma." Sophie clapped her hands with delight. "Now we can be happy again. Mommy said we just had to wait for the missing piece to find us." As Emma tucked Sophie into bed an hour later, the little girl grabbed her hand. "Aunt Emma, will you live with us now? The house feels more like home when you're here." Emma looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like that very much," Emma said softly. "Good," Sophie yawned. "Because Mommy said our family's biggest adventure is just beginning." As they turned off the lights and headed downstairs, Emma realized that Sophie's words carried more weight than a typical 6-year-old's sleepy chatter. This child saw things others couldn't, and if she said their adventure was just beginning, Emma believed her. But what kind of adventure could possibly top finding family after a lifetime of being alone? As Emma settled into the guest room that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie's gifts would soon reveal secrets none of them were prepared to face. The missing piece of Emma's life had finally fallen into place, but something told her that the puzzle was far from complete. 2 weeks had passed since Emma moved into the Morrison house, and she was still adjusting to her new reality. The guest room had been transformed into a proper bedroom, complete with family photos that now included her. But it was the small moments that made her feel most at home. Sophie's sleepy hugs in the morning, David's coffee waiting for her each day, and the sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Emma had quit both her jobs, much to David's relief, though she insisted on finding meaningful work rather than simply accepting his financial support. The safety deposit box Sarah had left contained enough money to give Emma breathing room. But more importantly, it held answers about their family history that neither sister had known. Their grandmother, Margaret Parker, had been a schoolteacher who immigrated from Ireland in the 1940s. She had raised their mother alone after their grandfather died young, instilling strong values about education and perseverance. The documents revealed that their mother, Catherine Parker, had been forced to give up both daughters due to severe mental illness and poverty. "She loved us," Emma told David one evening as they sat in his study reviewing the papers. The social worker's notes say she cried for days after giving Sarah up, and again when she realized she couldn't keep me either. "Sophie was right about your mother wanting you both," David observed. "These records show she fought to keep you as long as she could." Emma nodded, touching the locket that had belonged to their grandmother. "I just wish Sarah had lived to see this, to know we were both wanted." "She knew," a small voice said from the doorway. They turned to find Sophie in her pajamas, holding her favorite stuffed elephant. "Sophie, you should be sleeping," David said gently. I had a dream about Mommy again, Sophie announced, climbing onto Emma's lap. She wanted me to tell you something important. Emma exchanged glances with David. Sophie's dreams about Sarah had become more frequent since Emma's arrival, and they were always remarkably accurate about past events no one had told her about. What did Mommy say? Emma asked softly. She said to tell you that the happy times are about to get complicated, Sophie said seriously. Someone from the past is coming, and they're not going to like our new family. David frowned. Sophie, what kind of someone? A mean lady who thinks she knows what's best for everyone, but doesn't understand love, Sophie replied. She's going to try to break us apart because she thinks money makes families, not hearts. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Sophie, when is this person coming? Soon, Sophie said, then brightened. But Mommy said not to worry because love always wins if you fight hard enough for it. Before either adult could ask more questions, Sophie kissed Emma's cheek and scampered back to bed, leaving them with more questions than answers. Should we be concerned? Emma asked David. I've learned to take Sophie's warning seriously, David replied grimly. Let's hope this time she's wrong. But 3 days later, Sophie's prediction proved chillingly accurate. Emma was in the garden with Sophie, helping her plant flowers for a memorial garden dedicated to Sarah, when David's assistant called with urgent news. Mr. Morrison, you need to get home immediately. Patricia's voice was tense. Margaret Henley is here, and she's demanding to see Sophie. David's face went pale. Margaret Henley was Sarah's adoptive mother, a wealthy, controlling woman who had disapproved of David from the beginning and had been conspicuously absent from their lives since Sarah's funeral. We'll be right there, David said, ending the call. Who's Margaret Henley? Emma asked, sensing the gravity of the situation. Sarah's adoptive mother, David explained as they hurried inside. She never approved of our marriage and blamed me for Sarah's death. She said if Sarah had married someone more suitable, she might have lived longer. Sophie tugged on Emma's hand. That's the mean lady from my dream, she whispered. She wants to take me away from Daddy. Emma's protective instincts flared immediately. Over my dead body, she muttered. They arrived home to find an elegant older woman in an expensive suit sitting rigidly in the living room, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who were clearly lawyers. Margaret Henley was 72 years old, silver-haired, and carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to getting her way. Her cold blue eyes immediately fixed on Sophie with possessive intensity. There's my granddaughter, Margaret said, rising from her chair. Sophie, come give grandmother a hug. Sophie instinctively moved closer to Emma, who placed a protective hand on the child's shoulder. Mrs. Henley, David said formally, this is unexpected. Is it? Margaret's gaze swept over Emma dismissively. I've been monitoring the situation, David. Imagine my surprise to discover that you've moved a complete stranger into my granddaughter's home, without any background checks or proper vetting. Emma isn't a stranger, David replied carefully. She's Sophie's aunt. Margaret laughed coldly. A supposed aunt who conveniently appeared just when you needed someone to help with childcare. How terribly convenient. The DNA test confirms, David began. DNA tests can be manipulated, one of the lawyers interrupted. Mrs. Henley has concerns about the rushed nature of this arrangement and its impact on Sophie's well-being. Emma felt anger rising in her chest, but Sophie squeezed her hand, somehow sensing the need for caution. What exactly are you suggesting? David asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Margaret smiled triumphantly. I'm suggesting that a man who allows strangers around his daughter is perhaps not fit to have custody of such a precious child. I've petitioned the court for emergency custody of Sophie, citing concerns about her safety and stability. The room fell silent except for the sound of Sophie's sharp intake of breath. You can't do that, Emma said, stepping forward. Sophie belongs with her father. And you are? Margaret asked with icy disdain. I'm Emma Parker, Sophie's aunt and Sarah's sister. Margaret's expression didn't change. Prove it. Emma showed her the DNA results, the locket and Sarah's letters, but Margaret dismissed them all with a wave of her hand. Convenient evidence that could easily be fabricated. she said. "What I see is a young woman of questionable background who has ingratiated herself into a wealthy family under suspicious circumstances." "Mrs. Henley," David said firmly, "you have no legal standing to challenge custody. Sophie is my daughter, and I make decisions about her care." "Actually," the second lawyer spoke up, "Mrs. Henley has filed for grandparents' rights and emergency custody based on concerns about the child's environment. The court has agreed to a preliminary hearing next week." Emma felt the world spinning around her. Just when she had found her family, someone was trying to tear it apart. Sophie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up in a clear, strong voice. "Grandmother Margaret, why are you being mean to Aunt Emma?" Margaret's expression softened slightly when addressing Sophie directly. "Sweetheart, I'm just trying to protect you. This woman claims to be your aunt, but we don't really know who she is or what she wants." "I know who she is," Sophie said simply. "She's Mommy's sister, and she belongs with us." "Darling, you're too young to understand." "I understand that you didn't come to Mommy's funeral," Sophie interrupted, with the brutal honesty only children possess. "I understand that you made Mommy cry when you said Daddy wasn't good enough for her. And I understand that you only want me now because you're lonely." Margaret's face flushed red. "Sophie, that's not—" "Mommy told me in my dream last night that you would come," Sophie continued. "She said you're scared because you lost your daughter and you think taking me will fill the empty space in your heart. But Mommy said love doesn't work that way." The adults in the room stared at Sophie in stunned silence. Her words carried a wisdom far beyond her 6 years. "She also said," Sophie added quietly, "that you're not really mean, just sad, and that if you stop trying to control everyone, you might discover that families can be bigger instead of smaller." Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "Sophie, I just want what's best for you." "What's best for me is staying with Daddy and Aunt Emma," Sophie said firmly, "but you could visit us if you promised to be nice." Emma watched this exchange with amazement. Sophie was handling a complex adult situation with more grace than any of the grown-ups in the room. "Mrs. Henley," Emma said quietly, "I understand your concerns. If I were in your position, I might have questions too, but I love Sophie, and I would never do anything to hurt her." "Love," Margaret scoffed. "You've known her for 2 weeks." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Emma replied. "Sarah wrote in her letter that love makes families, not time or blood or money. Sophie has made me feel more like family in 2 weeks than I felt in 23 years before meeting her." Margaret studied Emma carefully for the first time, perhaps seeing past her own preconceptions. "Nevertheless," she said finally, "the court will decide what's in Sophie's best interests. I'll see you at the hearing." As Margaret and her lawyers prepared to leave, Sophie called out one more time, "Grandmother Margaret, Mommy wanted me to give you something." Sophie ran to her toy chest and retrieved a small wrapped package. "Mommy hid this for you, just like she hid Aunt Emma's letter. She said to give it to you when you were ready to stop being angry." Margaret unwrapped the package with trembling hands. Inside was a photo of Sarah as a little girl, hugging a much younger Margaret, both of them laughing. On the back, Sarah had written, "To the woman who taught me that love is shown through actions, not words. Thank you for giving me a foundation strong enough to build my own family on. I hope someday you'll see that your love is big enough to embrace David and our children too. With gratitude and love, Sarah." Margaret stared at the photo for a long moment, her composure finally breaking completely. She forgave me," Margaret whispered. "Mommy said you taught her how to be strong," Sophie said gently. "She wanted you to know that the strong part of her is the part that loved Daddy and me. She said you should be proud of that." Margaret looked around the room, at David, at Emma, at the home filled with love and laughter, and seemed to see it clearly for the first time. "I need to think," she said quietly. "The hearing is still scheduled, but I need to consider what Sarah would really want." After Margaret left, Emma sank onto the couch, emotionally drained. "How did you know about that photo?" David asked Sophie. "Mommy showed me where she hid it." Sophie replied matter-of-factly. She said Grandmother Margaret needed to remember that love makes people bigger, not smaller. Emma pulled Sophie into her lap. You were very brave today. I wasn't scared, Sophie said. Mommy told me everything would be okay if we just told the truth about love. That night, as Emma tucked Sophie into bed, the little girl had one more revelation. Aunt Emma, Grandmother Margaret isn't going to take me away. How do you know? Because Mommy visited her tonight too, Sophie said sleepily. She's going to call tomorrow and say she changed her mind. Emma hoped Sophie was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that even if Margaret withdrew her petition, bigger challenges lay ahead. Sophie's gifts were becoming more pronounced, and Emma wondered if the world was ready for a child who could see truths that adults spent lifetimes trying to understand. As she kissed Sophie goodnight, Emma realized that protecting this extraordinary little girl might require more courage than she had ever imagined. But for the first time in her life, she had something worth fighting for with everything she had. Margaret Henley called the next morning, just as Sophie had predicted. David, her voice was subdued, almost fragile, I need to withdraw the custody petition. David, who had been preparing for a legal battle, was caught off guard. Margaret, what changed your mind? I had a dream last night, Margaret said quietly, about Sarah. She helped me understand that I was trying to take Sophie because I was afraid of losing what little family I had left. But she showed me that family grows. When you open your heart, it doesn't shrink. Emma, who was listening on speakerphone, felt relief wash over her. She also told me, Margaret continued, that Sophie has gifts that will need protection, not control, and that I should trust you and Emma to understand those gifts better than I could. Mrs. Henley, Emma said softly, you're welcome to be part of Sophie's life. She's lucky to have grandparents who love her. Thank you, Margaret replied, and for the first time her voice held genuine warmth. Perhaps I could visit this weekend. I'd like to get to know you properly, Emma, and I owe Sophie an apology for not seeing her clearly before. After the call ended, Sophie appeared in the kitchen as if she had been waiting for the conversation to finish. See, she said brightly, Mommy fixed it. But Sophie's next word sent a chill through both adults. But now we have a bigger problem coming. What kind of problem? David asked carefully. Sophie's expression grew serious beyond her years. There are people who want to study me because of the things I can see and know. They think they can learn how to do it too, but they don't understand that it's not something you can copy or steal. Sophie, where are these people? Emma asked, her protective instincts on high alert. They're watching us, Sophie said matter-of-factly. They've been watching since Grandmother Margaret started asking questions about our family. One of her lawyers works for them. David's blood ran cold. Sophie, how do you know this? I can see their intentions, Sophie explained. They're not mean like Grandmother Margaret was, but they're dangerous because they think my gifts are more important than my feelings. Emma knelt down to Sophie's level. Sweetheart, what exactly can you see that other people can't? Sophie tilted her head, considering the question. I can see people's hearts. Not the beating kind, but the feeling kind. I can tell when someone is lying or when they're going to do something before they know it themselves. And sometimes I can see connections between people that they don't know about yet. Like with Emma and me, David asked. That was easy, Sophie said. You and Aunt Emma have matching heart colors. That's how I knew you were supposed to be together. Emma and David exchanged glances. This was the first time Sophie had suggested that she and David were meant to be more than just family. Sophie, Emma said carefully, what do you mean by supposed to be together? The same way Mommy and Daddy were supposed to be together, Sophie said simply. Mommy told me she picked you for Daddy because she knew he would need someone to love who would love him back the right way. The implications of Sophie's words hung in the air between Emma and David. They had both felt a growing connection over the past weeks, but neither had acknowledged it given the circumstances of their meeting. But that's not the important thing right now, Sophie continued, with the matter-of-fact tone she used when switching between topics. The important thing is that the watching people are coming tomorrow, and they're going to pretend to be from a magazine that wants to write about our family." David immediately went into protective mode. "Sophie, I want you to stay close to me or Emma tomorrow, okay? Don't talk to any strangers, even if they seem nice." "Okay, Daddy. But you should know that they already have pictures of us and recordings of our conversations." "What?" Emma felt violated at the thought of their private moments being monitored. "Not here in the house," Sophie clarified, "but when we're in public. The lady at the coffee shop last Tuesday was recording us with her phone, and the man at the park yesterday was taking pictures while pretending to read his newspaper." David pulled out his phone and immediately called his head of security. "Marcus, I need a full security sweep of the house and grounds, and I want personal protection details starting immediately." While David arranged security, Emma focused on Sophie. "Are you scared about these people?" she asked. "A little," Sophie admitted, "but not for me. I'm scared for you and Daddy because you don't understand how far some people will go when they want something they can't have." The next day brought exactly what Sophie had predicted. A woman calling herself Dr. Jennifer Walsh arrived with credentials from Family Dynamics Quarterly, claiming to want to interview the Morrison family about their inspiring story of found family. David met with her in his study while Emma and Sophie stayed upstairs, but Sophie insisted on listening from the top of the stairs. "Mr. Morrison, Doctor," Walsh began, "our readers would be fascinated by how your daughter seemed to predict finding her aunt. That's quite remarkable intuition for a 6-year-old. "Sophie has always been perceptive," David replied carefully. "Perceptive enough to predict specific events?" Dr. Walsh pressed. "Our research suggests that some children possess capabilities that go far beyond normal intuition." "What kind of research?" David asked, his suspicions confirmed. "We're part of a consortium studying exceptional children," Dr. Walsh admitted. "Children like Sophie, who demonstrate apparent precognitive abilities or unusual emotional intelligence. We'd like to invite her to participate in some harmless assessments." "Absolutely not," David said firmly. "Mr. Morrison, you may not understand the significance of what you're dealing with. Sophie could represent a breakthrough in our understanding of human consciousness. Don't you want to know the full extent of her abilities?" "I want to protect my daughter's childhood," David replied. "This conversation is over." Dr. Walsh's friendly demeanor dropped away. "Mr. Morrison, there are people with much more authority than I have who are interested in Sophie. It would be better for everyone if you cooperated voluntarily." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality. Children with Sophie's abilities have been documented throughout history, but they've never been properly studied. We have federal backing for this research." David stood up. "You need to leave. Now." After Dr. Walsh left, David found Emma and Sophie waiting for him. "She wasn't really from a magazine, was she?" Emma asked. "No. They're some kind of government research group studying children with unusual abilities." Sophie hugged her father tightly. "Daddy, we need to go away for a while." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I can see what they're planning," Sophie said quietly. "They're going to come back with papers that say they have the right to take me for testing. But if we're not here, they can't take me." Emma felt panic rising in her chest. "David, can they really do that?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking any chances," David said grimly. "Marcus," his head of security, appeared immediately. "Pack 3 bags and prepare the jet," David ordered. "We're leaving in 2 hours." "Where to, sir?" David looked at Sophie, who had proven remarkably accurate in her predictions. "Sophie, where should we go?" Sophie closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a smile. "Ireland," she said confidently, "to where Grandma Margaret Parker grew up. Mommy says there are people there who understand children like me, and they know how to keep us safe." Emma's heart skipped. "Sophie, how could Sarah know about people in Ireland?" "Because Grandma Margaret wasn't the only one in our family with gifts," Sophie said simply. "It runs in families, but it skips generations sometimes. Mommy didn't have it, but she knew about it because Grandma Margaret told her stories." As they rushed to pack, Emma realized that their adventure was far from over. Sophie's abilities were apparently part of a larger family legacy, and now they were fleeing the country to protect her from people who would exploit those gifts. But as their plane lifted off that evening, heading across the Atlantic, Emma felt a strange sense of anticipation rather than fear. For the first time in her life, she was part of a family worth protecting, and she would fight anyone who tried to harm the little girl who had brought them all together. Sophie, buckled into her seat between Emma and David, looked out the window at the disappearing lights below. "This is where the real adventure begins," she said softly. "Mommy says Ireland is where we'll learn the truth about our family's gifts and why they're so important." Emma took Sophie's small hand in hers, marveling at how this extraordinary child had transformed all their lives in just a few weeks. "Whatever comes next," Emma said, "we face it together." Sophie smiled and squeezed her hand. "That's what family does, Aunt Emma, and we're going to need each other for what's coming." As the plane soared through the night sky toward Ireland, Emma couldn't help but wonder what other secrets their family history held, and whether they would be strong enough to face whatever challenges awaited them on the other side of the ocean. The rolling green hills of County Cork, Ireland, stretched endlessly in every direction as their rental car wound through narrow country roads. They had been driving for 2 hours since landing in Dublin, following directions Sophie claimed came to her in dreams during the flight. "Turn left at the stone bridge," Sophie instructed from the back seat, pointing to a structure that looked like it had stood for centuries. Emma was amazed by Sophie's confidence in navigating a country none of them had ever visited. The little girl directed them through villages that seemed frozen in time, past ancient ruins and farmland that spoke of generations of quiet living. "Sophie, how do you know where we're going?" David asked as they turned onto an even smaller road. "Grandma Margaret's memories," Sophie replied matter-of-factly. "She left them in the things she touched before she came to America. Mommy showed me how to see them." Emma was beginning to understand that Sophie's gifts went far beyond simple intuition or emotional intelligence. The child seemed to have access to a kind of collective family memory that defied explanation. "There," Sophie said suddenly, pointing to a cottage nestled in a grove of ancient oak trees. "That's where we're supposed to go." The cottage looked like something from a fairy tale, with stone walls covered in ivy and smoke curling from a chimney. A wooden sign by the gate read, "O'Sullivan," in elegant script. As they approached the front door, it opened before they could knock. A woman in her 70s emerged, with silver hair braided down her back and eyes the same unusual green as Sophie's became when she was using her gifts. "You made good time," the woman said in a melodic Irish accent. "I'm Bridget O'Sullivan, and I've been expecting you." Emma stared in shock. "Expecting us?" "Little Sophie's been calling to me in dreams for the past week," Bridget explained with a warm smile. "Told me 3 Americans would be arriving today, including a child with the sight and a young woman who's just discovering her own gifts." Sophie ran to Bridget without hesitation, as if greeting an old friend. "Aunt Bridget, I told them you would help us." "Aunt Bridget?" David questioned. "Not by blood," Bridget clarified, scooping Sophie into a hug. "But Margaret Parker was my dearest friend before she left for America. We were both born with the sight, you see. When she couldn't come home herself, she made me promise to watch over any of her descendants who inherited the gift." Emma felt a chill of recognition. "The sight? The ability to see beyond the veil between what is and what might be," Bridget explained. "To understand the connections that bind all living things. Margaret had it strong, but she was frightened by it. She thought it would be easier in America, where such things weren't spoken of." As they settled into Bridget's cozy living room, filled with crystals, herbs, and books that looked centuries old, Sophie immediately made herself at home. "Tell them about the family legacy," Sophie prompted Bridget. Bridget studied Emma and David carefully. "The Parker women have carried this gift for 7 generations. Margaret thought it had died out when Sarah showed no signs of it, but gifts often skip generations, and they can present differently in each person." "Emma has it too," Sophie announced. "She just doesn't know how to use it yet." Emma shook her head. I don't have any special abilities. Don't you? Bridget asked gently. Haven't you always known things about people that you couldn't explain? Felt drawn to certain places or situations for reasons you couldn't name? Emma thought about her instant connection to Sophie and David, her ability to read people's true intentions, the way she had always known when someone was lying to her. That's just intuition, Emma protested weakly. Intuition is another word for the sight when people are afraid to call it what it is, Bridget said kindly. Sophie's gift is unusually strong, which is why those researchers were so interested in her. But you, Emma, have something equally valuable, the ability to protect and amplify the gifts of others. What does that mean? Sophie answered before Bridget could. It means you make my gifts work better when you're near me, and you can hide us from people who want to hurt us. Bridget nodded approvingly. Exactly right. The protector gift is rare and precious. Margaret had it too, but she never learned to use it properly. David, who had been listening in fascination, finally spoke up. What about me? Do I have any of these abilities? You have the gift of grounding, Bridget replied. You keep Sophie connected to the normal world so her gifts don't overwhelm her. Without you, her abilities could consume her. Emma realized they were talking about a carefully balanced system, so we all need each other. Precisely. That's why Sophie knew from the moment she saw you that you belonged together. She could see the spiritual connections that bind your souls. Over the next few days, Bridget taught them about their family's history and how to understand and control their gifts. Emma learned to recognize when she was sensing someone's true emotions versus surface feelings. Sophie learned to distinguish between her own thoughts and the impressions she picked up from others. Most importantly, they learned that they were part of a network of families around the world who carried similar gifts and protected each other from those who would exploit them. The researchers who were following you, Bridget explained on their third day, they're part of a government program that's been trying to weaponize psychic abilities for decades. They take children from their families and train them to be tools instead of letting them develop naturally. But we got away, Sophie said confidently. For now, Bridget agreed, but they'll keep looking. That's why you need to learn to hide your gifts when necessary and protect each other always. Emma felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. How do we do that? By understanding that love is the strongest protection of all, Bridget said simply. Those researchers can detect psychic abilities, but they can't penetrate the barrier created by genuine love and family bonds. As their week in Ireland drew to a close, Emma realized how much had changed. She had gone from being a lonely young woman to being part of an extraordinary family with gifts that connected them to something larger than themselves. We can't go back to Chicago, David said as they prepared to leave. They'll be watching for us there. We don't need Chicago, Emma replied, surprising herself with her certainty. We have each other. Sophie nodded sagely. Mommy said home isn't a place, it's the people you love. Bridget provided them with new identities and contacts in other countries where their gifts would be understood and protected. They chose New Zealand, where David could start a consulting business and Emma could use her newfound abilities to help others. On their last night in Ireland, as they sat by Bridget's fireplace, Sophie made one final prediction. We're going to help other families like us, she said dreamily, families with gifts who need protection. And someday, when I'm grown up, I'm going to come back here and learn everything Aunt Bridget can teach me. What about your daddy and me? Emma asked with a smile. You'll be there too, Sophie said confidently, because Daddy's going to marry you next year and we'll really be a family in every way. Emma's cheeks flushed red while David coughed in surprise. Sophie, David said carefully, that's not something you should predict. Why not? Sophie asked innocently. I can see your heart colors, and they match perfectly. Besides, Mommy said she picked Aunt Emma for you before she even died. Emma looked at David, seeing the affection and possibility in his eyes that she had been afraid to acknowledge. One thing at a time, Emma said softly. First we build our new life, then we see what else develops. But as David reached over and took her hand, Emma knew that Sophie was probably right about this prediction too. 6 months later, they were settled in a beautiful house overlooking the ocean in Wellington, New Zealand. David's consulting business was thriving. Emma had found work with an organization helping displaced families, and Sophie was attending a school that specialized in educating gifted children. They had heard nothing from the researchers, though Bridget kept them informed through encrypted messages that they were still searching. One evening, as they sat on their deck watching the sunset, Sophie made an announcement. "Grandmother Margaret is coming to visit next month." "How do you know?" Emma asked, though she had learned not to question Sophie's pronouncements too closely. "She called Aunt Bridget and asked for our address," Sophie replied. "She wants to apologize properly and learn about the family gifts so she can understand me better." David smiled. "I think I'd like that." "She's bringing presents," Sophie added with excitement, "and she's going to stay for my birthday party." Emma looked around at their little family, David reading on the couch, Sophie drawing in her sketchbook, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. It had been nearly a year since that night at Mel's diner, when a blind date had failed to show up and changed everything. "What are you drawing now?" Emma asked Sophie. Sophie held up her latest artwork. It showed their house by the ocean, but with additional figures, more children, more adults, all holding hands in a circle of love and protection. "Our future family," Sophie explained. "All the people we're going to help and who are going to help us. Mommy says our story is just beginning." Emma realized that Sophie was right. They had found each other against impossible odds, discovered gifts they never knew they had, and built a love that could protect them from anyone who tried to tear them apart. As David joined them on the deck and put his arms around both Emma and Sophie, Emma felt complete for the first time in her life. She had started with $7 and a failed blind date, but she had found something worth more than any amount of money. A family that loved her unconditionally, and gifts that connected her to something eternal. "I love you both," Emma said softly. "We love you too, Aunt Emma," Sophie replied. "And tomorrow I'm going to show you the most amazing thing. I can see all the way to Ireland in my dreams, and Aunt Bridget is teaching me new things every night." Emma smiled, no longer surprised by anything Sophie could do. Their little girl was growing into her extraordinary gifts, surrounded by love and protection, exactly as it should be. And if Emma was entirely honest with herself, she couldn't wait to see what Sophie would show them next. After all, their adventure was just beginning.